Well, here from Blevins Franks this week, it's James Stirling's turn to share his financial insights and advice. How are you doing, James?
I'm very well, thanks, Howard. How are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you very much. Our previous topics have covered moving from the UK to Spain and how retirement here compares to the UK from a financial perspective. This week and next, we'll cover an important subject for anyone relatively new to Spain, understanding and navigating Spanish taxation. So James, the starting point should probably be, when do you become subject to Spanish taxation instead of UK taxation? What makes you resident for tax purposes?
So when we look at this from a UK perspective to begin with, I think that's really important. So in the UK, we can apply what's called split year treatment. And essentially what that means is at the point you leave the UK, you can inform HMRC that you are no longer tax resident and you are stop being taxed at that point. Once you decide to become tax resident in Spain, in very simplistic terms, what you have to do is be here for 183 days. Once you've been here for 183 days, you are deemed tax resident and therefore you have obligation in terms of tax reporting. Now, the common question I get from clients is, okay, James, is it when I move out and then 183 days after that? And it's not. So it's cumulative through any calendar year. And what's really important is you take advice in the months preceding a move to ensure that you're able to get a tax efficient outcome when you become tax resident here in Spain.
What happens if you arrive in Spain partway through a year?
It's a really common question we get. When we first meet clients, one of my initial questions is, when would you like to move out? Now, there may be family reasons. They have children starting school, so they have to move out in September, or they might decide to go earlier in the year. But my advice always is that we have a clear break between the two. So you know when you're going to end UK tax residency, and you've planned for becoming Spanish tax resident. If you arrive partway through the year, so let's say in September, then in that calendar year, it's going to be virtually impossible for you to have spent 183 days in Spain unless you've done holidays during the year. So taking advice is really important. But to have a foolproof plan, then arriving in the latter half of the year is going to ensure that you're not going to become tax resident until the beginning of the following calendar year.
In the past, some expatriates used to live here under the radar, so to speak. But this must surely have become much more harder to do these days. What happens if the hacienda determines it's someone that should be paying tax here, but isn't?
It's a really interesting question. And when I first moved to Spain and I was sitting in meetings, I was somewhat surprised at the number of people that had been living here under the radar for such a significant amount of time. Now, as you quite rightly point out, these days it's becoming increasingly hard for a number of reasons. One, we now have these electronic systems in airports, so they know when people are here and when they're not. But also I've been privy to some cases where clients have not been tax resident or claiming they will not be tax resident. But the haciendas looked into their circumstances and found that there were electricity bills being paid full as if they were living here, or they had information on their car registration that had been here. So my advice to clients always is to be incredibly transparent. Make sure you meet all the criteria as a tax resident in Spain. Most of our clients are retirees. They've spent their whole life being prudent, saving up for their retirement and then moving to Spain. The last thing you want is a situation whereby you now have the hacienda breathing down your neck, then potentially there's an investigation, potentially you have to pay some tax, and all the late fees that come with that. So be as transparent as possible and get your circumstances sorted as soon as you know that you need to do that.
What advice and encouragement can you give anyone who would love to live here full-time but is worried about becoming a tax resident?
The best place to start is to take advice. And as I said on a previous episode, the longer the period you have prior to a move, the better the advice will be and the more you can do in terms of tax planning. I wouldn't say anyone should be worried about becoming tax resident. Typically, people view Spain as quite a high tax country, but actually with the correct planning, you can live a very tax efficient life in Spain for most people, and you get to live in Spain. So I wouldn't be put off at all by the tax side of things. I would also say to people who are maybe younger professionals with a family, you can also have a very tax efficient life in Spain with the right planning. So whatever demographic you are, whatever your role is, what you're looking to do, seeking advice will be a very good first start.
And of course, the Blevins Franks website is the first port of call.
It is indeed.
At blevinsfranks.com. Well, thanks, James. James will be back next week when he'll summarise the key Spanish taxes in 2026 for us. So I look forward to that. They say a week is a long time in politics. I don't know in broadcasting.
Given everything going on at the minute, I think that's a very apt quote from Harold Wilson.
It is indeed.